Good evening. My name is Tony Farley and I'm the Executive Director of Sydney Catholic Schools. I start by extending a warm welcome to everyone who's joined us in this, our second family forum, which focuses on the critical issue of student wellbeing. This evening we have more than 650 families online from across our 150 primary and secondary schools, and we know you're looking forward to an informative and engaging session. Joining me in the studio is my colleague, Dr. Jacqueline Frost, and we'll be crossing to Dr. Kate OBrien, the Director of Education and Research for our system of schools and one of the most highly regarded educators in Australia. Part of Dr. Kate's role as Director of Education and Research is leadership of our system's student wellbeing team, and her insights will be invaluable tonight.
Thanks, Tony, and good evening to everyone. In this time of lockdown and remote learning, our teachers and school leaders are acutely aware of how difficult it is for parents to keep their children on track, educationally and emotionally, while also keeping their own work and family lives together as well. Tonight, to kick it off, we've got the students from St Mary's at Erskineville who are bringing us our acknowledgement of country. And Jolene from Regina Chaley at Beverly Hills will be sharing with us the Regina Chaley School Prayer.
We begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation upon whose ancestral land we are privileged to gather.
We pay our respect to them and are grateful for their care on the land.
We acknowledge our gratitude that we share this land today.
Our sorrow, the cost of sharing our hope that we can move to this place to a justice and partnership together. May we walk gently on this land.
May we walk gently on this land. May we walk gently on this land. May we walk gently on this land.
May we walk gently on this land.
Together we pray for our school and parish community. May we be people who act with faith, love and kindness to all we meet. We pray for peace in our world and in our daily lives. May our school be a place where we love to learn and learn to love, following in the example of Jesus who shows us the way. We make this prayer through Christ our Lord. Amen.
We know our students learn best when they are physically, emotionally and spiritually secure, and another way of describing that is well-being. As our students move through 13 years of schooling, life necessarily involves challenges and setbacks that are unavoidable. The term often used to explain how we can effectively manage these difficult life experiences is resilience, and helping to develop resilience in our students is an essential component of the education we offer. When we talk about supporting well-being, it's definitely not about things being perfect. It's about our students having the support and structures that will help them to navigate life's ups and downs and to have the confidence and skills to manage whatever is in front of them. The approach to wellbeing in our schools is based on frameworks that are designed to provide every student with the strongest foundation to reach their goals in both learning and in life.
So this evening, we'll be taking you through those structures and approaches and what we have in place in our schools to support every student's wellbeing. Now, in one way or another, all our students will access these supports because they're embedded in everything we do in our schools. We're particularly conscious of the need to identify issues of concern with our students as early as possible. And to do that, we have to work closely with our parents and our students in an open and trusting way.
It goes without saying, since the pandemic began early last year, feelings of anxiety and uncertainty have grown in all parts of our lives. While that's true, it's also true that we found new ways to manage our working and personal lives that are also positive and lasting.
We're hosting a series of workshops for parents that are run by one of Australia's leading clinical psychologists, Andrew Fuller, who takes participants through the key strategies for managing our family lives in a way that's sustainable, realistic and positive. Now, Andrew's first 2 sessions have reached capacity, but there'll be 2 more in term 4, so look out for those. We caught up with Andrew earlier this week, and this is what he had to say.
Hi everyone, I'm Andrew Fuller. I'm a clinical psychologist. I'm also the author of Tricky Behaviours and the A to Z of Feelings and Your Best Life at Any Age and any number of books. And I'm going to be doing over the next few weeks a series of webinars on Zoom for parents, and I'd love you to come along to them. I know it's been such a turbulent time. 2020 and its aftermath, 2021, really has thrown us all a bit for six. And the key effects that it's had are anxiety, hopelessness, and helplessness. So young people of any age, let's face it, are often left feeling anxious, feeling fairly helpless and fairly hopeless. And so clearly our antidote in families and in schools is basically to be calm as much as we can, to be helpful, and to be hopeful. So let's just talk about three kind of key ideas around doing that. The first one is that we know that the strength of our communities and the strengths of our relationships matter a lot. And so we are all literally in the care of one another. And so one of the great things about the network of schools that we have is that we look out for one another in a great community of support. And that's an incredibly important aspect of Catholic schools, I think. The second one is what we know about well-being is that well-being isn't just about well-being. In fact, what we know is that if we can help young people to feel good about themselves as learners, that makes a big contribution to their well-being. So the more that we can help them to build their academic self-competence, the more powerfully they're going to actually look after themselves, take care of themselves. So one of the kind of interesting things to think about is, as parents and as teachers, we want to really make sure that all of our kids' learning mojo, if you like, is turned up. And that's exactly what we're going to be covering in this series of seminars. The third thing is that there are a number of key skills. I know when you're at home, when you're locked down and there's an assignment due and there's a whole list of things that haven't been done, any sane parent freaks out, right? Okay, now don't give up freaking out entirely, but at the same time, you need to recognize that you are not just an unpaid teacher, parents. You are a parent, and we need you to be a parent. However, there are a couple of key skills that predict long lifetime success that you can really help out just with the school. Okay, let me go through the big six skills that any parent can provide for their child to really help them be successful. The first one is to basically get them to know their learning strengths. And you can go on my website, www.mylearningstrengths.com, and get a free letter that says, Katrina, you're fantastic at this, basically, and here's a way of doing it that you can improve in other areas. That's worth doing. The second one is learning how to plan. Now, I know 2021 has like been the reverse of planning, right? However, plan what you can. And so plan to have good times and as a family is important. The third one is being able to concentrate. So in a world that is distractible, we need to be able to focus on the main things. And partly that applies to the media too, that you want to think about, okay, I'm going to get my source from reliable, information from where I can trust it. And I'm going to focus on that and not get too distracted by all the other voices that are crazy going on about this kind of time that we know. The next one is memory. Now, we know the highest correlate of academic results is intelligence, but the highest correlate of intelligence is memory. So if we can build memory in people, guess what happens? They do better at school. So building up memory, and it's really simple. Some of the stuff that you know as a kid, when you were a kid, basically that games that you played, card games and chess and so on, or learning a musical instrument, all that stuff plays off. The next one is impulse control. It's a leap forward in anyone's life. That moment when you finally realize that the first idea that flies into your head is not always your best idea. It's a really important skill to have. And so think again, what's plan B? They're all useful strategies in families. And the last one is the resilient mindset. How do we help kids to basically see themselves as being successful, but when they're anxious or avoidant, as all of us are from time to time, how do we get back into that zone, the resilient mindset zone, so we can go and succeed? Anyway, we'll cover all of these in the workshops. Come along, be part of it. It's going to be great. Look forward to seeing you there. Thanks so much.
As you can see, he's a really, really amazing clinical psychologist, and we're looking forward to Andrew Fuller, so make sure you sign up when you can. Calm, helpful and hopeful. It sounds like a good plan, but how do we make that happen in our schools? Let's ask Dr. Kate OBrien, who leads our system-wide student wellbeing team, in addition to being an educator, a mother, and can you believe it, a grandmother, to summarise how Sydney Catholic Schools approaches student wellbeing. Kate.
Thanks so much, Tony. It was wonderful to listen to Andrew Fuller and his enthusiasm about supporting our school communities and families to have a deeper understanding of student wellbeing. Sydney Catholic Schools has a very strong focus on pastoral care and student wellbeing, and it includes a real focus on their emotional and spiritual needs. It's really important that if we work within the space of wellbeing through our experts from the office that support our schools, through the programs that schools have around mindfulness and our school counsellors, if we get wellbeing right, then the learning will happen, and Andrew alluded to this. And we aim in our schools to create a culture that really supports every student to fulfil their potential, where they're in a safe and supportive environment where they can flourish. Our approach is underpinned by evidence that demonstrates the strong association between safety, wellbeing and learning. And it's a shared responsibility. It's a shared responsibility with the families, with the students and with the staff in our school communities and with our parish, who also contribute significantly to that sense of belonging and connectedness. Sydney Catholic Schools follow the Australian Student Wellbeing Framework, and for mental health, the BU framework. It's a holistic approach, supporting the students to thrive emotionally, physically, spiritually, and academically. Now back to you, Tony, in the studio.
Thanks, Kate. Look, this approach leads us perfectly into how we use that Australian Student Wellbeing Framework to guide our explicit teaching, our classroom practice, and our school culture. Now, in particular, the elements of the framework which we're going to be looking at tonight include belonging, student participation, community partnerships, and programs of support.
Now, we all know this, but it's worth reminding ourselves that the school principal is the primary go-to person for any serious concerns you might have for your child. Along with their class teachers, our principals have the responsibility, knowledge and resources to help students and parents, no matter what the issue might be. And in everything that we talk about tonight, our school principals are central to what we do. So let's get started on the wellbeing framework and talk about the idea of belonging.
Well, no matter how old or young we are, belonging is essential to our health and our wellbeing. The human need to be part of a family, a friendship group, a community and society is strong and enduring. We need look no further than the current lockdown and the restrictions on our ability to gather and socialise to see how important belonging is to our health and wellbeing. So that brings us to our first poll tonight. We're going to be putting up on the screen some options to see what you would like to know a little bit more about. Perhaps you'd like to hear some more about the wellbeing culture in the classroom, respectful relationships, maybe managing behaviour issues in the classroom, or diversity and inclusion and the impact on wellbeing. And you can simply select it on your screen and we're going to be guided by you in our conversation. So while you're having a look and deciding what you'd like to hear a bit more about, Kate, why is belonging so important to wellbeing?
Jacqueline, it's really very, very important to wellbeing. And it's important also to be part of a thriving Catholic community. When we feel we belong at school, in the family or in our faith community, we connect with our heart. It gives us purpose and a sense of protection from the things that are bigger than ourselves. We want our students to have friends and to feel included, to be part of a group that allows for support in positive times and in those times that are challenging and we're not sure what to do or what decisions to make. It gives an avenue when we belong to the support when we're struggling. It's important to find ways for all students to belong, to be able to share their talents and gifts with others. It helps us to feel safe and to contribute in a positive way. So back to you for the poll results.
Thanks for that, Kate. They're really interesting results. If you see there, we've got those top 3 managing behaviour issues in the classroom at about 30%. And then we've got the others, around the high 20s.
Right. Yeah, 29, right there behind it. So let's talk a little bit then about managing behaviour issues in the classroom, because that was our lead runner. And really, when we're talking about managing behavioural issues, it's important to recognise that we're talking about a broad spectrum of behaviours in the classroom. So like lots of our discussion tonight in terms of wellbeing, things happen upon a continuum. So it ranges from behaviour issues in the classroom, which might be acting out, minor disrespect to a teacher or a fellow classmate, right through to disruptive behaviours that get in the way of learning. And we're talking about that whole continuum.
One of the issues with that is that we often think in terms of the negative and disruptive behaviours, but there can be other behaviours as well. A child withdrawing and being quiet and silent and not participating.
Absolutely. And that's why our teachers are so key, because in knowing their students and knowing the different gifts that they bring to the classroom, they're really able to embed that in an individual behaviour plan or an individual personalised learning plan that looks at where can they really thrive, where can they really flourish, and how can that be supported by different activities or different ways of learning.
That was a really great poll to start with. You'll often hear about student voice and participation, and it's an important part of a modern, thriving school. Giving our students the opportunity to respectfully and intelligently express their views at school prepares them for the world of work and community that they'll eventually be part of. Now, for our next poll, we involve student voice in a number of ways, and which would you like to hear most about in terms of that? The BU mental health programs, our anti-bullying programs, resilience and mindfulness programs, or our positive behaviour strategies. So let's hear again from Dr. Kate about the idea of student voice and participation while you respond. Kate, what does student voice exactly mean?
That's a very good question, Tony, and it's one that is a great change agent from when I went to school and obviously when you went to school, to the young people in schools today. And student voice means that students have a say in their learning and in their contribution to the group, to their family, and eventually in society. It's a process of helping give them those skills that they need to actually be able to articulate what they stand for and their values into the future. Providing opportunities for student choice in their learning from the early years where they explore the world around them with wonder and awe, to being able to choose a direction of learning that they know they love and excel in is important to wellbeing. At the moment, students in Year 10 are choosing their electives for next year. It is important for them to choose things they are passionate about, that they do well in, and that they know will support their approach to learning in other subjects. Having a voice in the things that happen every day provides for greater engagement and richness in learning. So back to you.
Thanks, Kate. And I do remember a time at school. We weren't quite of that era. I think with my parents, it was this idea that children should be seen and not heard. And thank goodness that's no longer the case. So that's really helpful, Kate. Those polls were really interesting, resilience and mindfulness programs. And this is particularly important at the moment as we've got our students with remote learning, our parents struggling with a whole range of issues in their own lives in terms of work. That resilience and mindfulness is really important, isn't it?
Absolutely. And it's important to recognise what we mean when we say resilience, because sometimes we can think of resilience as that, stoic attitude or just charge on. But in fact, it's not. So resilience is really about being able to do well during or after an adverse event. So it's when something has happened in a student's life or in a family's life or in a society's world and life, and being able then to do well during that or then beyond. And that's really what we're trying to teach our students to do. And COVID's giving us a great lesson in that. And you hear, even as you're going through the remote learning, how those lessons are being embedded. Because if a child feels safe and secure, if they're given appropriate responsibility to be able to manage those events, then they're going to be able to learn more effectively.
The other part of this is that in terms of our resilience and mindfulness programs, it's something for parents to have a look at as well as we work through the issues and the complexities of COVID and all that that's bringing to us. So there's a lot in it for all of us, and they're particularly constructive programs. And we think that there's a lot for parents to delve into, not just for their own children, but for themselves and their broader families.
Yeah, I think when we're talking about resilience, it's really important to recognise that any sort of wellness or well-being really works on a continuum, where we have students who really flourish at one end through to struggling to cope, maybe having some difficulties, right through to when those difficulties or those adverse events like trauma might get in the way of learning or being able to function. And it's completely natural for young people and adults ourselves to move backwards and forwards along that continuum. Resilience in our mindfulness programs is about getting students to recognise where they are on that continuum at any point and being able to nudge back towards the flourishing end. And that's what educators and parents do. We try and teach our children, even though we're creeping into that's a little bit difficult, I'm not sure I can do that, but being able to move them back up.
The great thing is we can all learn in that process.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, no school is an island, and every school relies on connections and collaborations that can increase opportunities that we can provide for our students and our parents and our staff. It's also important to understand that our schools are a ministry of the church, and they exist to give our schools the opportunity to know and love Christ through teaching and learning. And we're constantly building connections with universities, community groups and businesses to expand that capacity to provide our students with as many options as possible, both in their further study and their working lives. So that brings us to our next poll as we think about community partnerships. We're interested in knowing, what do you want to know more about? Is it about the professional development and wellbeing training that our own teachers get? Is it about Catholic Care, which is a key partnership for us in the community? Is it about those parish connections, or perhaps the network initiatives? And while you're responding, Kate, we often hear about this sense of wraparound services when we're talking about community endeavours. What does that mean? What is a wraparound service for wellbeing?
Yeah, thanks for that, Jacqueline. Wraparound services are those services that recognise, bring a particular expertise around how to support a student to access learning. And they could include things like referrals, engagement with expert practitioners like speech therapists or occupational therapists, or other social and community services such as counselling. There's a whole range of wraparound services that schools would access to help a student to be able to learn in a more rewarding and engaging manner. It's really important for parents to discuss any concerns they have about how their child is learning with the school, because the school very often has an insight into a particular wraparound service that would best help that particular child with whatever it is that they need support in. And I've had a great experience in this space with my children. One in particular who's severely dyslexic, and you search out for those experts that can help you in a way that a school teacher can't help because they don't have those skills. Teachers have the skills to identify when a student may need further support for a specialist service, and those discussions with parents are critically important for the best outcome for all students to be able to learn and thrive. And that's what we want for all of our children. So back to you for your poll results.
That's great. Thanks, Kate. And I think you've touched on it perfectly there when you talk about the skills of our teachers, and that's clearly something that people would like to know more about, because it was clearly the front runner in the poll there, which was about professional development and wellbeing training that our teachers have. And it's really interesting in terms of this shift, because NESA has recently changed the way professional development is accredited, and wellbeing has been one of the 4 key priorities that have been identified in terms of being able to provide professional development for teachers and have it registered.
And we approach this in terms of a system. So with 150 schools across Sydney, we can systematise a lot of what we offer, and it's very different to being a single school. So if you look at a lot of the services in terms of mental health aid, trauma practice, supporting and understanding particular behaviours, and what we do with our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students, that's across the system that we can provide those services. And as we create our networks, it's also an opportunity to collaborate, and some skills that might be available in one school within a particular networked area can be provided to other schools as well. So we're in a very good position in terms of how we can use our resources to best effect.
Absolutely. And I think what's key when we're talking about our teacher professional development in the wellbeing space is it goes hand in hand with the teacher's own wellbeing. Because unless our teachers are able to look after themselves and understand how to manage their own wellbeing, then they can't be that person there that often a student, particularly if they're going through a difficult time or they need some help, that's the person that they're relying on. So much of the approach that we're adopting as a system, as Tony said, is about trying to balance that. How do we enrich our practice and understanding wellbeing of our students, but how do we also enrich the wellbeing of our teachers so they can be there for the students?
And it's an opportunity for a big shout out to our teachers and our school staff, our school leaders, for the work that they've done. They have their own lives and their own children, and they're creating this remote learning experience, working through contacting parents every week. They're doing an extraordinary job, and hang in there. We just love you and think you've just done the most fantastic job. So thank you. It's probably appropriate now. Our schools have access to a range of counselling, allied health and support services that can be called upon when necessary. When we talk about collaborating with parents, it's important to understand that we can do our very best for each student when we work closely with parents. While there's a time and a place for a whole range of interventions, more often than not, the most effective and important initiative is to simply talk things out through an open and trusting dialogue between parents and teachers. We now come to our last poll of the evening. What would you like to hear more about? Is it when to seek additional help? Is it about counselling and support services? Is it about allied health services? Or is it about expert mental health partnerships? Kate, as people respond, is it natural for parents to worry about the well-being of their children?
Well, the never-ending question, Tony. It's very, very natural to worry about your children. Everybody wants their children to be happy and healthy, to be protected and safe, and to go to school happy and enjoy their life. We want them to be cared for and to be looked after at school and given every opportunity to thrive. You know, teachers also worry about the wellbeing of their students. They know their students very, very well, and that's why the relationship with families is so critically important. The most important thing to remember is that the relationship in your family is the most important part of being at home, juggling family life, learning and work. And the school wants to support you and to learn from your expertise. I still worry about my children, and they are adults with their own children. It is important for us to model how we deal with the complexities of life. So they have experiences of working through things, learning from our mistakes and building positively for the future. Over to you for the results of the final poll.
Thanks, Kate. That's really interesting. When to seek additional help. It is such an important issue. When you think that there's something that's not quite right, a change in behaviour, a change of patterns or preferences that you see in your child, you really need to speak to your teacher, your class teacher, or the school principal or the assistant principal, the person that you're maybe closest to and most comfortable with raising that. And you are never going to be in a situation where you would feel uncomfortable about that, because that's exactly what we want you to do. So that's the first thing in terms of additional help.
Absolutely. It's also important to sort of use a little bit of a litmus test yourself as a parent, that if you feel like the emotions that your child is expressing or the behaviours that they're exhibiting are interfering with their ability to learn, or to access school or to do what they would usually be doing, that's the right time to ask for some more help. So the minute that it feels like that's getting in the way of them being able to learn, that's a really good test for, I might just have a discussion with the school to see, is this a similar thing that's being reflected in the classroom? What's happening with their work? And just to check in to see whether or not it's just a bit of a blip or it's something actually that needs some more work.
So another way of describing that is to be alert and not alarmed. It's Perfect. One of those things where you are looking at what's going on, you're talking it through, you're just sensing what's happening for your child at a particular time, and talking that through, as we say, with the class teacher. It may be the school principal as well. So to have a sense that it's okay, and as you move along, your intuition is probably pretty good in a lot of these situations. And so go with it, really. Yeah,
absolutely. It's about getting all of those pieces of the puzzle and putting them together. What's happening in the classroom, what's happening at home, what's happening external in terms of friendship groups, it might be sport, etc. And putting all of those pieces together will let you get that picture that is, as you say, alert but not alarmed.
The other point with this is it may be that there are issues more broadly in terms of your family and your particular circumstances, and particularly at this difficult time with COVID. So again, if you're having those issues, as we talked about tonight, and you feel as though you need to talk to the teacher or the school principal about it, be assured that confidentiality is absolutely guaranteed in this situation, and you should feel comfortable in coming in and talking to us about it.
Absolutely. So sometimes when we're talking about wellbeing, it is about being a little bit proactive. Sometimes we can think that our children are more resilient, maybe, because of the way they do sort of just carry on through. So if there's something going on for you at home, maybe you've suffered a loss in the family, you might be dealing with grief, financial pressures, loss of a job, breakup or separation, any of those things, you can talk to the school to make sure that it's not something that the child is having trouble with. And like always, the more information that a teacher has, held in confidence, will help them to ensure that the student is flourishing in the classroom.
So thanks so much. Those polls have been incredibly interesting and really helpful for us in terms of what we're going to be doing into the future. It's been a jam-packed half hour, and we hope you've found this family forum informative and worthwhile. Wellbeing is and always will be a priority focus for all 150 of our schools. And please always know that if you have any concerns about your child, just get in touch with your child's teacher or school principal, and they'll be very happy to help.
A very short anonymous survey will be shown on the screen at the end of the forum, and we'd really value your feedback about tonight. We'd also appreciate your thoughts on what you'd like to see us cover in the next session. A recording of this session will be hosted on the SCS website in the next couple of days.
Thanks so much for participating, and we look forward to you joining us again in next term's Family Forum. Good night and God bless.